In the year of our Lord 1315, the rains did not cease, and the grain rotted in the field. The dread of the empty larder fell upon every house. A 14th century English chronicler captured a fear that has all but vanished from the modern world: the cyclical, ever-present threat of starvation. Yet that fear was met with extraordinary ingenuity. In this episode, we open the larder, the pantry, and the smokehouse to uncover 7 lost arts of preservation, the quiet technologies that held the hungry gap at bay. The medieval household did not live by the day or the week, but by the season. Life was bound to the agricultural calendar. A brief period of abundance, followed by a long, dangerous lean. The enemy was not just winter itself, but the hungry gap, the early spring, typically April and May, when the last of the winter stores had been eaten, yet the New Year's crops were still green in the field. Every family, every year, had to cross this narrow, precarious bridge. There was no refrigerated supply chain, no global network delivering strawberries from one hemisphere to another. The food on the table in March was whatever had been harvested, hunted, or slaughtered the previous autumn. A mild, wet autumn, like the one described in the 1315 Chronicle, meant spoiled grain and weakened livestock. A long winter meant salted meat and dried pulses vanished faster than planned. For the farmer, the cooper, or the miller, survival rested on a single skill: the ability to interrupt the natural march of decay. This was not a pastime, the way home canning might be for us today. It was a non-negotiable, communal science. The resilience of the village depended on the larder of each household. Daily life was a low, constant war against mold, rot, and insects. It was fought not with machinery, but with accumulated wisdom. The careful use of salt, smoke, air, acid, and sugar. The battle was usually decided in autumn, in the slow, methodical work of preserving the harvest. The first and most vital line of defense was salt. In a world without refrigeration, salt performed its quiet miracle through osmosis. In dry curing, a farmer might take a side of bacon and work coarse gray salt into the flesh by hand. The scrape of crystals across the skin was the sound of survival. The meat was then packed into a wooden barrel, layered with more salt until it was completely buried. The salt drew moisture out of the meat and out of any bacteria present, desiccating and killing them. For wet preservation, that same principle became brining. A supersaturated solution of salt and water was mixed and tested with an egg, which, according to a 13th century treatise, should float to the breadth of a groat. In such brine, fish, especially the crucial herring from the North Sea, were submerged for weeks. The liquid shielded them from decay and prepared them for long journeys inland. Next came smoke. In many cottages, this was almost accidental. Sausages and bacon flitches hung high in the rafters, slowly cured by the daily smoke from the central hearth. But more intentional preservation required a dedicated smokehouse. This was not the hot, fast smoking we associate with barbecue. It was cold smoking, a process measured in days rather than hours. Green, damp wood produced a thick, pungent smoke that slowly dehydrated meat or fish. More importantly, the smoke deposited phenols and other compounds on the surface, forming an acidic, antimicrobial coating hostile to mold and rot. Where the sun was dependable, air itself became a tool. This was desiccation in its purest form. Along the coasts of Scandinavia, cod were hung on great wooden racks, called hjell, exposed to relentless, dry sea winds. Over weeks, the wind stripped nearly every trace of moisture from the flesh, turning the fish into stockfish, hard as a board, and almost as imperishable. Properly stored, it could last for years. In southern climates, fruits such as figs and apricots were spread across flat rooftops, their sugars concentrating under the sun. Indoors, bunches of thyme, rosemary, or sage dangled from beams, their rustling dry leaves promising flavor long after the garden had withered. For wealthier households, There was potting, a method that used fat to create a nearly perfect seal against air. Cooked meat, often game or pork, was finely shredded or minced, then tightly packed into small earthenware jars. The crucial step was the cap. Clarified butter or rendered lard was heated until liquid and poured over the meat, flooding every gap. As it cooled, it set into a solid, airtight lid. This potted meat could last for months with its flavor and texture largely intact. The first clean crack through that pale fat layer in mid-January was the sound of foresight rewarded. Acid provided another powerful weapon. In the process we now call pickling, vegetables like cabbage and onions, and even fish, were submerged in vinegar. The resulting low pH environment was hostile to most microbes. But vinegar itself was valuable and not always abundant. For a cheaper, more common acidic agent, households turned to verjuice. The sharp, sour juice pressed from unripe grapes or crab apples. The creak of the fruit press in early autumn was a sign of this harvest. Verjuice was rarely drunk. Instead, it preserved other foods and formed the base of sauces that could sit without spoiling. Finally, where salt was precious, sugar was treasure. Used sparingly, it operated as another osmotic guardian. Fruits such as quinces or damsons were slowly boiled in honey or, later, in sugar syrup. This produced some of the earliest sweet preserves. The dense concentration of sugar pulled water from the fruit just as salt did from meat, making it nearly impossible for bacteria to survive. The result was a thick fruit cheese, or leather, that could be cut into blocks and stored, a rare thread of sweetness woven into the deep, lean months. Each of these 7 methods was a small but critical victory in an unending struggle to stretch autumn's abundance across the long, uncertain year. When we look back at these techniques, we see more than a list of old-fashioned chores. We are witnessing a profound intimacy with the life cycle of food itself. The medieval farmer understood, with a clarity we have largely lost, exactly where sustenance came from and how quickly nature would reclaim it if neglected. There was no convenient away where things could be thrown. Every part of an animal, every bruised apple, every surplus cabbage had a designated purpose. This was a waste-nothing economy, not born from environmental ideology, but from absolute necessity. Today, many of us inhabit a different kind of magic. The supermarket's perpetual, seasonless abundance. Our shelves are full, yet this constant convenience has come with a hidden cost. We are estranged from the sources of our own survival. We have outsourced our resilience. Here, the sage finds the lesson. This lost resourcefulness is not just a set of old recipes, it is a form of agency. It is practical knowledge that grants a deep sense of security, the quiet confidence of the well-stocked pantry. When we practice these skills, even in simplified, modern forms, baking sourdough, pickling garden vegetables, curing a piece of fish, we are not merely playing at history. We are reconnecting with an ancient, grounding wisdom. We narrow the distance between consumer and producer, and in doing so, reclaim a small but vital part of our human identity. The problem solver, the provider. If you believe this practical wisdom is worth preserving, consider supporting the archive. Our work exists because of a small community of patrons who value these lost arts and help keep them alive. And to our fellow problem solvers, what echoes of this ingenuity still live in your own family traditions? Do you salt, cure, smoke, or can? Share those stories in the comments below, your methods, your memories, your experiments. We read every one,